Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, it's so funny how social media can change your life so quickly. I was at the National Academies of Engineering this morning giving, some words of wisdom about responsible AI, and then I get on the train, and then I just kind of check LinkedIn. And if you haven't seen it, it's going viral right now. It's the paper, some material science put out a paper from China, but it was published in an Elsevier journal, and the very first line in the introduction of the paper is something to the effect of course I can help you write your introduction, : and so they just cut and pasted, and it looks like the whole paper was, made by Gen AI, and it was published in a somewhat respectable journal. And so I was kind of laughing because, this is everything that I wage war about. And as a people analytics conference, the HR department at Elsevier is probably having a rough time because I'm calling for some heads. People need to be fired. I give the list of people that need to be fired. We need to stop. I just have to wonder, in terms of people analytics, this technology is really going to complicate your lives a lot. I think now, this is really kind of foreshadowing, you're going to have to babysit the people, and you have to babysit the technology. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the technology, a little bit of my background. So you heard I was a fighter pilot. There's a lot that goes with that, which is to say that I wake up every morning with a knife between my teeth, ready to just do battle. It's an illness, and not surprisingly at this age, now I have high blood pressure. So I don't know what happened there. I'm going to have to stop. But, this is the single-seat fighter pilot world where you have to do everything by yourself. At least that's what we tell you, and that's what we want you to believe, that we do everything by ourselves. But it turns out, even in the world of single-seat fighter pilot, Maverick and all that, it turns out you really don't do anything by yourself. There's always at least 1 to 3 planes flying with you. You probably don't ever really fly by yourself. And then this is an air operations center. So this group of people with all these big maps, and everybody's got several computers at their workstation, they all exist in a team really to support fighter pilots to make sure that we're successful, do our jobs. And so, it's fun to say that, I can do everything by myself, thank you very much. But the reality is, for a long time, even with advanced technologies, we've known that it's going to take a village to make the systems work. But, when we start to see how AI and fighter planes, maybe, I don't know what it's doing. There might be a tiny bit of AI, but, the AI back then was very simple, and it's obviously getting much more complicated. But where do you see it now in your everyday life? Those of you who are sleeping and then you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're like, I've got to have that new nightgown dress that everyone has on Amazon, and you order it, and then you go back to sleep, and then you wake up at 8 a.m., you're like, oh, it's on its way. How did that happen? It happened because you sent your order to a robotic warehouse. Not all of the Amazon warehouses are robotic, but a lot of them are. And your order basically gets sent to one of these machines, and the machines bring a stack of boxes to a human who is standing in one place, and then the human takes the dress and puts it into a box that goes down a conveyor to get wrapped and get shipped out. So in the olden days, somebody used to have to walk miles of warehouse floors to find this. Now it's running so much faster because robots are doing a lot of the optimizing. There's some good things to that, and there's some bad things to that. But it's the system that we have right now. This is a robotic dump truck. This is my student. That's how small he is. This is a robot. This is a very well-behaved robot with some artificial intelligence. This is happening in mining in Western Australia in a place called the Pilbara. And these things are amazing. They don't speed. They don't get in fights on Friday night and so in this sense, we have had an amazing success with robotic vehicles with artificial intelligence inside what we would call well-structured, highly constrained domains. And we've even had a lot of success with these little delivery robots. We have these at George Mason, so if you ever want to come out to Fairfax, we'll show you. Got little delivery robots that bring food everywhere. And in all these cases, there are teamings. You know, there's the robots here team with the picker. The robots here, they are actually supervised by one person that could be thousands of miles away that are making sure it doesn't get stuck. These are also supervised by humans. Every now and then they get stuck. And I live about 4 miles from campus, and one was kind of close to me in my neighborhood. I'm like, I don't think you should be over here, little guy. But I'm such a curmudgeon in my older years. I'm just like, let it go. I just, let's roll the dice. I didn't even call him to tell him it was over there. I'm just got chaos. That's who I am. Okay, now, so I think it's important when you start to think about teaming, how do you know when you need some AI teaming? And so this is a rubric that I came up several years ago. It's the one thing that I'm going to be a little academic, but really, if you can remember this, you will always know when a robot is coming for your job or whether you need to set up some kind of AI teaming world. And that is this idea that any agent, a human or an autonomous agent, has to step through these layers of reasoning. And at the very bottom, we have skill-based reasoning. And I've put it into context of driving here, although you could use many other examples. I do driving really because I have a 16-year-old at home who tries to kill me every day in the car. And so it's just been particularly acute as I tell these stories about just watching her go from a person who has no skills to, in theory, is going to be safe. You know, it's been a struggle. And I've never wanted self-driving cars more than right now. All right, so when you learn to drive, you see the white lines and you learn how to stay in the middle of them, help keep you got a track, not quite in the center, but a little off center, and you actually have to pay attention for several hours to make sure you're not wandering in the lanes. And then once it becomes highly automatic, you never think about it again until your sensors start to fail. And indeed, this is why at the other end of the spectrum, when you start to get old and your eyes don't work as well and your reaction times don't work as well, staying in between, and you've all seen it, the ping-ponging older person going down the lane, it's a sign, by the way, if your family ever gets to that point, that's the time to get them out of the car because it shows that their sensors and their faculties are just not up to snuff. All right, but once you've got that highly automated, you actually free up cognitive resources in your brain to start looking at the signs and symbols in the world. And this is where I show you a stop sign. We call it rule-based reasoning. You know that you're supposed to start braking 50 feet before, come to a full stop, go on. So my daughter, who is 16 and incredibly, naive, so she does most of the driving, but one day, we just needed to get there. And I drove, and I just went flying, rolling stop through a stop sign because I just had to go. And she said, Mom, you should have stopped. I'm like, no, I didn't. It was one of those stop signs that's on a post. And if it's on a post and not a pole, you don't have to stop. And totally sucker. She's like, really? I'm like, no. Okay. But you know what? I could deal with, there's a little bit of uncertainty in there, but I could see all ways and I could see that nobody else was coming and I was able to break the rules a little bit and be safe about it. So once you do that, though, once you learn all the signs and symbols in the world, then you free up more cognitive resources and you can start to see the uncertainty curve is getting bigger. And this is called judgment under uncertainty. You really have to start making some guesses. You may not have perfect information in the world, so you have to start making some estimates about what's happening. And I show up here the stop sign that's partially occluded by leaves. Now, up to this point, self-driving cars, as long as they can see the lines, and as long as they can see the edges of the road, and as long as they can see the stop sign, fully, self-driving cars do great. But this is where we start to diverge between rule and knowledge-based reasoning. Humans, I flashed this slide up here, and you were like, for sure, that's a stop sign. Never even thought about it. You spent a millisecond not even thinking about that was a stop sign. But this is a self-driving car killer. I mean, they really struggle with partial occlusions of the signs and symbols in the world. There was an accident recently in California where the CalDOT, or whatever they call it out there, moved a light, and they moved it maybe half a foot over and a foot up. And because it just moved very slightly, the self-driving car could not see it and had a crash. And you're like, that's pretty brittle, right? It just moved a little bit, and just because it was slightly out of place, the cars really struggle. And so this is actually a problem that we understand to be with neural nets, not just neural nets in cars, neural nets in any kind of generative AI. They're really brittle, and they really have a hard time reasoning out of anything that wasn't exactly like they were trained. And so we get up to this intersection that was a real intersection somewhere in the world, that, clearly, if you got there, you were like me, you broke a rule, and I have a four-wheel drive, I have a Jeep, I break rules all the time. It's just what I do. I'm either trying to get people fired or driving and breaking rules. And so, but if you got there, you would know what to do immediately. What would you do? Somebody tell me, what would you do? You'd make a U-turn, right? Because, you got there safe. Maybe you shouldn't be there, but you're just going to turn around and try to scamper out before somebody catches you, right? And self-driving cars, this would shut them down, right? Because all the signs are conflicting, assuming they could read all the signs. And so we start to see that at this point, at this break between rule and knowledge base, right now, I'm not saying never, but right now, no autonomous system can reason under uncertainty in the same way that humans can reason under uncertainty. And so if there are problems in the world, if the world doesn't match the way they were trained, the autonomous system is going to have serious problems. And that is what, for you, your signal to, I probably should have a teaming arrangement here. And indeed, we see this a lot in self-driving cars. One of the things that the companies are trying to do, but they don't want you to know that they're doing, is that they have remote warehouses of people who are helping the cars figure the world out. So they're sitting at a desk, they see what the computer sees, the car calls for help. Where's in that light example I gave you, it says, where's the light? I don't see the light. Is the light green or red? And so it calls back to the remote ops center, and then the human helps them figure this out. So actually, self-driving cars, you hear about them as being autonomous systems, but they're only semi-autonomous because there is a lot of human supervision happening. For drones, the same. Military supervises their drones. You have to supervise your drone right until it goes into the tree. So we know now, we can see that these relationships are emerging. We can see that humans are either surreptitiously or somewhat in the open, backfilling for the lack of cognition that happens at the knowledge and expert layers. And expert reasoning happens under maximum uncertainty. It is the unknown unknowns, and the example I like to give is Chesley Sullenberger and Miracle on the Hudson. Small little engineering factoid, we do not understand winds at all. So even though we can highly automate flying, winds aloft, winds at the surface level, big mystery to us. And so it really wasn't clear whether or not, had that plane been autonomous, whether or not it would have made Teterboro or been able to turn around and go back to the airport. And so Chesley Sullenberger had to just make a guess. And he guessed right. And computers are not good guessers. AI absolutely is not good guessers. This is why whenever you do Gen AI, I love it when my students use ChatGPT. I catch them every single time. Because first of all, they don't write that well for most of the part. And secondly, because there'll always be some turn of phrase that sounds like it came out of the SAT English lit section where you're like, no one uses that word. Where are you getting this from? All right, so, and that is what it looks like for the people doing the self-driving. So it's literally a video game. So in the remote centers, There are some, not all companies do this, but some companies, what is it doing? Some companies will send the images to this person, and the person has to, like a car gets stuck, it has to kind of get in reverse and drive and figure it out. Some systems only have a person with a mouse click, and so they don't actually get to drive, and we call that remote monitoring, whereas this is remote driving. Now, this is huge right now, because it turns out, this is why it's really, really important, my people analytics people, you really need to make sure that if you're going to do a human-AI teaming relationship, that you're extra clear on the technical limitations. And one of the things that we see here is that this works maybe okay in very, very slow scenarios, really just trying to back out of something very slowly. There is a company in Las Vegas. You, right now, at least this is what they're advertising, can fly into Vegas, and they are going to remotely drive their car from their warehouse to pick you up at the airport, and the driverless car is going to come up to you, and then you're going to get in and then drive the car away. So they're doing this at highway speeds. It's not possible. They're not telling the truth, and this is actually why it's super, super, super important that you understand the technical limitations. This, if you have latencies that really exceed more than about 10 milliseconds, the remote driver is going to crash because they're not going to be able to see what happens in the real world fast enough, and then the bits and bytes have to flow back quick enough to what we call close the feedback loop. And so we're starting to see some emergent, very unsafe human-AI teaming relationships. So this is a good lesson of, yeah, human-AI teaming is great, but you also have to appreciate when it doesn't work. It doesn't work at high speeds for remote driving. It also does not work a lot of the time in a Tesla. Now, Elon and I have a long-standing war, and I always tell people that if I mysteriously die, he did it, or the CEOs of Google and of Waymo and Cruise did it. After today, the CEO of Elsevier did it. But you can never rule out my crazy ex either. He could have done it too, right? So, I have been after people who owns a Tesla, and there's at least a handful of people who drive Teslas. Yeah, thank you. Get some extra life insurance. Don't trust the autopilot. I've been telling people this for years, and of course, in the last couple of weeks, some big things happened. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration finally did a recall on them because they're dangerous. And the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety also put out a report and gave them very, 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 very poor failing marks on the self-driving. So, I haven't been telling you this just to be a pain in his side. And, every now and then when his minions come after me, I have to, go out of town. But, this is another example of a really bad human-AI teaming arrangement. You've got a car that's called full self-driving, but isn't full self-driving, but does good enough to kind of lull you into a false sense of security. So it's just that time. You just want to check your email. That phone is sitting right there. The car's doing a great job. I just want to look at that text message. I just heard it come in. I've got to check the phone. So I do some expert witness consulting on occasion for really precedent-setting cases, but I am going to put my daughter. She wants to go to Penn, by the way. I'm hoping she does. I'm going to put her through Penn on all my expert witness consulting fees, because all you Tesla drivers out there, ladies, you're safe. For whatever reason, women are not doing this. 100% of these cases are all men who are dying. Sorry, I'm just reporting the facts. But, it's so tempting, and you really get a false sense of security about this, and then you overtrust the AI. But that interaction, the human working with the technology, the human supervise the technology, you can't just think you have a good idea and say, oh, well, I thought about it, so for sure it's the right thing. And I think most people in the room, if you're in this hall, it means that you understand the importance of working on a team and how to get feedback from others. But as you go into the world of AI, where generative AI is definitely exists to get you fired from your job. So you have to make sure that, yes, if you would go get a second opinion for a medical diagnosis, you also need to think about reaching out and getting other opinions too when you think you're trying to do something cool and clever when it comes to AI. All right, in other bad news, this is a Cruise vehicle in California. This is the accident that caused Cruise to lose its self-driving permit in California. And so what happened is a human driver was going down a road in San Francisco and a jaywalker came out and the car kind of obliquely hit her, just kind of, on her side, just touched her a little bit, but knocked her enough into the oncoming path of the self-driving car. It was physically impossible for the car not to hit her. But the car did the right thing. It slammed on its brakes hard, and when it hit her, the initial hit wasn't actually that bad. She didn't sustain that much damage from being hit by the car. But the car then decided it needed to pull over and clear the intersection, and she was under the front bumper at that point. Then it pulled over, dragged her, rolled over her, and then parked on her. That's her. Pretty bad. You want to know what's bad, my HR people analytics? Is that they had a remote operations center, still do. It was in Arizona, they're in California, and the remote operators saw the whole thing. Saw her get hit, knew she was under the car, saw the car drag her around, but what will go down in history is probably the worst HR decisions they decided, and technical decisions. There was no red button inside the remote op center. There was no way for them to call anybody to quickly get the car to stop. So we call that performative human AI teaming, right? They had the remote op center in place, and so now a handful of people are going to have PTSD from watching that unfold and not being able to do anything. And then, Cruise tried to deny it, and, again, it's going to be a Harvard business case, Wharton business case study, about all the things that companies should not do. But actually, this whole issue about the remote operators, most people miss it. When it's discussed by all the pundits, nobody talks about this, which is one of the reasons I was so glad that I could come here and talk to you about it, so you understood, you really have to make sure that you don't just look at one technology, the car. You have to look at the system that the car sits in. And, that's kind of the same issue that's happening with Boeing right now. I saw somebody at Wharton was quoted in an article to me that said, what is it doing? I don't know. It's got it doesn't want you to see that. I don't know what it is. It is just look at that. Okay, somebody at Wharton said, why is the CEO of Boeing still there? I think that's a good question because, as an engineering professor, look at it, it's just going somebody really wants to get to the reception, so I will make it fast. Boeing, we started this problem with the 737 MAX. That accident actually was a human AI teaming. There was a little bit of AI in the algorithm that was controlling the nose, but because Boeing didn't want to have to get the plane recertified through the FAA, it's very expensive and it takes a lot of time, they just didn't tell anybody it was there. And so what happened was the pilots were flying the plane and didn't realize that there was an artificial intelligent agent who was kind of shadowing him or her and also flying and maybe helping in ways that they didn't really recognize that they were being helped. So people who don't know that the human AI team is there, you're also going to set yourself up for a real disaster. And you definitely don't want to do that in a safety critical system. So if we could have ever gotten to the, let's see if it'll actually let me, oh, no. The one thing I would show you on the last slide is it's adventures in babysitting with AI. You know, you can't trust it. You don't know, since it can't work under uncertainty, at least in some of the physical worlds like planes and trains and cars, that we have some insight and we have some way to assess what is goodness and badness. With generative AI and ChatGPT, it is anybody's game right now. And what I would have shown you if the computer, I wonder if Air Canada was behind this. I was going to tell you about Air Canada just had an HR nightmare where Air Canada got a large language model to run one of its chatbots, and the chatbot told a customer the wrong procedure to get a refund for the grief fare. And then when the customer did that customer was smart, saved all the screenshots. Air Canada denied it and said, you didn't follow the right procedure. That chatbot is not our employee, so you shouldn't have believed our chatbot. So that person, I'll give it to them, clever, took Air Canada to court, and they got spanked so bad every which way but Sunday by the judge trying to say, how dare you try to say that this artificial agent that is on your website that you paid for, that you probably fired 3 people at least because you said it was going to replace their jobs, and now you don't want to be liable for it. And there's scores of lawyers in Canada and the US and probably everywhere else who are trying to use Gen AI to write their legal briefs, and Gen AI makes up citations like crazy. This is how I catch my students too. They don't know how to catch that. It's such a fun game being a professor right now. All right, so where do we go from here? Look, artificial intelligence, I'm a big fan. I've showed you some really great examples of how it can be good in the world. It can really help. It can improve safety. It can definitely improve efficiency. You got to know what that right human-AI teaming relationship is. You have to spend some money to really investigate that. And this is probably a friendly crowd who appreciates this, but a lot of people think that as soon as you can just train a human up, or we're like Air Canada, we're just going to get rid of the human, and they don't want to step back and really think slowly through the ramifications of what's going to happen if you do that. So slow and steady wins the race. Make sure you avail yourselves of the right levels of expertise. I cannot tell you enough. I talk about this all the time to companies. And nobody wants to hear this because they don't want an extra layer of bureaucracy in their companies. You need a chief AI safety officer, or a chief AI training officer, or a chief AI test pilot, whatever you want to call it. You need someone that is responsible for this, who may not, I'm not saying they have to go out and be able to create a 10-layer deep neural network. That's not what you want that person for. You want that person who understands how they work, who understands what to look for, who understands what performative safety theater looks like with AI, and knows how to stop that, and knows how to get the right, and can advocate inside the company to make sure that all the checks and balances. We don't even have time here for me to tell you how much you need to spend on AI maintenance. No company wants to hear that. What does that even mean? We don't know, because maintenance, we know what maintenance is, but now it turns out AI needs a lot of maintenance. And we're not even equipped to start building divisions of people who are doing nothing but maintenance. And am I going to outsource that? And what would that look like if I did outsource that? So there's a lot of big questions coming for all of the worlds that you're either in or are going to be in. And so you need to make sure that accountability is going to reign supreme here, because there needs to be one person who's willing to stand up and say, I've got the AI football, I'm going to run with it. Workforce development, of course, there's a little tricky. This graph I've got here is kind of funny, because I ran around the world a couple of years ago and talked to all the C-suites of aviation companies about AI, because we knew it was coming and we wanted to find out whether or not they were ready. And so the question was to the people one layer below the C-suites. So we said, for all these people in the C-suites, how many of them do you think need to get some training in AI so that they know what they're talking about when they talk about the company? 51% is definitely. 19.35% Probably. And the blue's kind of in the middle, and then only basically 16% didn't think their C-suite needed some more training. So it is. I see it in spades. I'm actually going to have to go on some kind of sabbatical soon because somebody's going to do the AI word salad in front of me, and my head is just going to explode. My blood pressure is just going to go off the charts. And because I just, as soon as you talk to me and you don't really know what you're talking about, but you think you know what you're talking about in AI, and that generally means because you read a couple of Wired magazine articles, you think you know what you're talking about in AI, and it's just horrifying to me, and I just can't take it anymore. And so you guys have got to go back to school. And how do you do that? Well, at George Mason, we've got a new certificate program that teaches people in these 4 classes. But I really, most everybody here's almost out of school. You're like, I am not going to do another schools program. But I show you these topics because people ask me all the time, what should I be reading? If I can't read the 2 Wired magazine articles, what should I be reading to get more educated? And I'm telling you that these are the 4 topics that you need to know to be able to manage the risks of AI. You need to know what is AI. You don't have to be a computer scientist to be able to understand AI. How do I put it? How do I engineer it into the systems? What is AI risk? How do we measure it? How do we test for it? How do we control for it? And last but not least, AI ethics. And so, there is a way for you to get smarter. So if you don't have time to do a certificate program or something like that, try to find resources. And I send my syllabus out like crazy, and so that people can actually see, you can have it and do all the readings for free. I'm happy to support your homework in this case. But what you really don't want to do, and I said this on LinkedIn today, is you really just don't want to show up in my LinkedIn feed. Because I will go after you. If you do word salad on the internet and I catch you, I'm going for it because I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of trying to convince people, this is the problem with the self-driving car world and safety critical applications of AI. It really does matter. It really will kill people. It has killed people. And so you need to take it seriously that AI is not everything that it is, that human AI teaming is really critical, but you have to take a slow and measured pace. So thank you very much.